I'm Aimee and welcome to part 2 of my bridesmaid's dress Angelica. So in part 1 we done some pattern drafting, pattern manipulation, pattern editing, and worked out a couple of issues that we had along the way of the first couple of mock-ups. So in this part 2, I'm hoping to put together this mock-up. As you can see, I've already got all the pattern pieces cut out, so I just need to sew together this mock-up, get Angie back to try it on, and then see where we're at, see if we are ready to make the real dress or if there is any more changes that need to be made. I'm hoping now that I've fixed all the issues, well, hopefully fixed all the issues that we were having in the last mock-up. I'm hoping that this is now going to be great. So let's sew this all together and then we'll hopefully get her around to try it on soon. I'm kind of trying to play about as well on what the best angle is to film from, for you to see what I'm doing, but also for me to be able to move and still be able to do what I need to do. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take all the bodice shell pieces and sew them all together. But before I start sewing the panels together, I need to take this centre front panel and add in the pleats. So that's what I'm away to do just now. I'll just fold the pleats in, following all the notches, pin them in place, and then put a basting stitch over to secure them and make sure the pleats stay in place. And I make sure to keep the basting stitch within the seam allowance as well, so then you're not going to see that from the outside of the finished garment. Now I'm taking the side front panels so that I can attach them to the centre front panel, and I'm just going to place them right sides together and then matching up all of the notches, pin them and then sew them together. And then we have a notch up here on the side front that matches up with the seam allowance for the centre front piece. So you need to match up that. What I'm actually going to do is take some chalk and my ruler and actually measure out the seam allowance to get exactly that point. I'll do this on both sides. On the actual fashion fabric, you want to make sure you do all of this on the wrong side of the fabric and whatever else, but for the sake of just doing this mock-up, it's not as important. So yeah, so then what you want to do is match up all of those points and pin that in place. And then in between here, you want to just ease them together, match them all up and pin it in place. Now that they're pinned together, I'm just going to take them back to the sewing machine and sew them together. And I'm just making sure once we get to that point that I've marked out all the stitching lines to stop stitching where those 2 points meet. Now I'm going to take the back bodice panels and I am going to attach them to the front just at the shoulder seams. I'm not going to close the side seams because we're going to insert the sleeves and then attach the lining all the way around before we close up the side seams, so that when we flip it all right sides out, we can enclose and conceal the seam allowance for the sleeves inside the lining and the bodice, so nothing pokes out and everything looks nice and flush and clean and tidy once it's all finished. I also then pinned and basted in the pleats into the back waistline. Okay, now all of the bodice shell pieces are sewn together. So we've got the pleats in the centre front panel, we've got the side front pieces attached, the shoulders of the back pieces attached, and then we have the pleats in the back panels also sewn into place. And now we've got the front, the bodice shell together. Pop that to the side for a minute, and we're going to do the same with all the lining pieces. Centre front, side front and back pieces of the lining, sew them together. Done! So now that I have both the bodice shell and linings sewn together, I am going to move them out to the side and take in our sleeve pieces. But before I sew these sleeve pieces in, I'm just going to quickly go around the outside edge of both sleeve pieces with a rolled hem using the overlocker. This is how I've decided to finish all of the dresses, all the hems and openings that are going to be visible on the finished garments, as in my opinion, especially with this fabric that is quite a flowy, nice airy fabric, I think the overlocker rolled hem just finishes it off nicely and still ties into my overall theme of the wedding, keeping things nice and clean but still that little bit of rustic edge. Okay. Now let's take all of this to the ironing board, iron it all nice and crisp. And then I'm going to press all the seam allowances open, just to make it all nice and neater when I sew all the lining and shell pieces together. At this point, between the centre front and the side front, you want to just extend that notch and clip right towards the stitching line. Just make sure you don't go through it, don't go past the seam allowance, just so that you can iron that flat into the centre front, that when you come to sew the lining and the shell together it works. And also you might need to clip some notches again towards the stitching line around the curved points, like bust points, if you've got quite a curved waist line, all that, just to keep everything nice and smooth. Okay, so the shell, we need both sleeves, we need the lining, we will need in a minute. But yeah, first off, let's just get this all arranged so we're organised again and know what we're doing. So here's the bodice shell. Okay, work out which sleeve is which. So if I just take one of them out, so we've got the shoulder notch, and then here this one's got two notches, so that's the back. So if we go like that, shoulder, that's the shoulder notch, that's the front, that's the back. So that would be in that side, which means that would be in that side. So what we want to do then is match up on this sleeve first, match up shoulder notch and the shoulder seam, pin that, and then just either side just work our way along and into the side seams. So as these are two opposite curves, I am just slowly but surely working my way around both sides of the sleeve just to make sure they ease together nicely and flow nicely. I don't want to stretch either of the fabrics at all. I just want them to just nicely ease together and match up along that distance. Okay, so while that sleeve's all pinned on, we'll just sew it round with a basting stitch just to keep it in place until we add the lining on. Just make sure and keep it nice and slow and just keep checking that you're not catching it or bunching it up or anything under the machine. So what I actually figured out from doing the first sleeve before I done the second sleeve was that it's actually much easier to do this if you sew it with the sleeve facing you, so the sleeve's up on top, and you can actually smooth out that sleeve as you're going. I now have both sleeves sewn into the shell, so I'm going to go around, attach the lining to the shell around the sleeves, enclosing the sleeves in between the two layers. So here at this square neckline, this is where it's also good that we marked out all these seam allowances, because now it's really important to match these up perfectly so you get that nice crisp square. I just wanted to note as well that although I am attaching the lining and the shell bodice pieces together just now, I'm actually going to do the neckline all the way around first, so that I can then understitch this whole seam allowance. This is just to make sure that the lining stays put where it's supposed to be. It stays on the inside of the dress whilst wearing it, and it is more important to have this done on the neckline than it is around the armhole. So that's where we are doing the neckline first, understitching it, and then we will sew the lining to the shell over the armholes, encasing that sleeve in. Yeah, it is fiddly and it is hard to explain, so hopefully it all makes sense. So I'm just making my way from the centre front, from that square neckline points. I'm just making my way around both sides and making sure that I match up any notches, any seams, and just make sure everything lines up perfectly. There are some points as well that the shell, that the lining is going to be slightly smaller or shorter than the shell, but that's done on purpose to make sure that in the end everything falls into place where it should be. But you just need to ease those bits together. And then here on the back pieces, we're just going to sew the shell and lining together until the bottom of the keyhole, so there is a notch there to indicate where to stop. So we're going to sew it together from that point right the way down the neckline and until that point on the other side, so that then the keyhole is all finished nicely, but the centre back is left open for putting in a zip. Okay, so that's one side done, so let's just repeat that on the other side. Okay, that's all pinned together now, so let's just sew it up. Okay, neckline is all sewn together, so let's understitch, clip into seam allowances, iron, and then do the armholes. Okay, so to understitch, you want to make sure the seam allowance is sitting towards the lining. Like all the seam allowance is sitting towards the lining, and then sew very closely to that seam line. but there's points that you're not going to manage to get too close. So like the top of the keyhole at the very centre back, you're going to have to sew till you can and then start again. Move around the piece, avoiding that corner. And then start again. And just do that the whole way around the neckline. Okay. Right, I've just tidied up some of those loose threads. Okay, it's much later in the day. I've done the horses and I'm back. But I have all I've done just now is just ironed the bodice, what I've done so far. So the ditch of the seam, you can see now faces the inside. And it's all looking quite neat. What I'm going to do now is flip it all inside out again. And then I need to sew the armholes closed. Now, sewing this seam shut gets a little bit fiddly, a little bit tricky because we've got the sleeve involved. So what I found best to do is to actually have the sleeve facing me, but then roll the sleeve up nice and thin so that it fits in that strap and isn't at risk of being sewn into the seam allowance, and then fold over the strap and match the seam allowances up. I hope that makes sense. So I'm starting at the shoulder again. That I just find that this is the best place to start, and then work my way to the front and work my way to the back. But I always find the shoulder seam being the best starting place. I'm just making sure that those shoulder seams match up, and then making sure that I'm pinning further than the seam allowance and that the sleeve is rolled up inside there away from the seam allowance so that it is not going to get sewn into this seam. Okay. Right, shoulder matched, and then I'll just work my way around either side, close it all up until I get to the side seams, because I won't be closing up the side seams. Just making sure again to match any notches and just make sure everything lines up nicely. One side, so I'm just going to do the same with the other side. Both sides are all pinned together, so I think I'm just going to quickly put these through the sewing machine and then call it a night. Yeah, let's do that, and I'll see you tomorrow. Hello, we are now on the next day, so I haven't done anything since last night, since I was last filming, so we're still at this stage. It's now all sewn together but inside out, so I'm going to pull it all back through. I had thought about understitching as far as I can around the armhole, but I'm actually going to leave it on this mock-up so we can see if we actually need to do that or not. Because the lining is made slightly smaller than the shell, that should pull it all to the inside anyway. And we have understitched the neckline, which is the most important part. You don't want that pulling out. So because we've done that, and then everything's all closed and pulled together around the armholes anyway, I don't think we will need to, so I'm going to leave it on the mock-up so I know that I don't need to worry about doing that on the real thing, because it's fiddly it comes with risks of then catching the sleeve on the inside and just messing it all up. So I'm just going to leave that. But anyway, what I'm away to do now then is get this all turned right sides out. So this in itself is a bit fiddly. So what I'm doing here is I am going up from the front with my tweezers and squeezing them up through that shoulder, through that strap, which is quite narrow. It is a very fiddly process. But then once I'm getting up there, I am then taking a corner of the back, grabbing it with my tweezers, holding it tight, and then easing and pulling it all through that strap to then get it the right way out. It's really fiddly, it's tricky, it took me a couple of attempts, I kept dropping it with the tweezers and had to try again, but I eventually managed to get both sides through. Perfect. And then we should have what's starting to look more like an actual dress. Now we can sew the side seams closed and then the bodice is done. So now I'm just matching up the side seams so I can close them up. So I'm making sure that I am sewing the front shell to the back shell and the front lining to the back lining, making sure that I am matching up the seams, matching up the sleeves, and then obviously matching up the bottom of the waistlines on both sides. And then we're ready to just take it to the sewing machine and sew up those side seams. So I pressed stop recording instead of start recording again. But all I done was ironed the side seam allowances open and then just folded them back over on top of each other, pressed them flat, and it's all sitting fine. And then obviously put it on the dress form just to see how it's looking, and it doesn't look bad, so I'm gonna go with that. It definitely looks much nicer in this fabric than it did in that poly cotton that we used last time. So yeah, I'm definitely happier with it. So yes, now we just need to get the skirt attached. So I actually have Angie come in for her supper tomorrow night, but I have the horse out to a competition tomorrow morning / early afternoon, so I'm not really going to have any time to work on it tomorrow. So I'm going to try and speed through the skirt, and yeah, hopefully I can get it together in time for her coming round. So yeah, let's crack on with that. As I said, I was in a bit of a rush, so I stopped filming so I could just crack on and get the skirt all sewn together and attached to the bodice so that I was ready for Angie coming around. Yeah, I just, from the slit seam, I just overlocked that, done that rolled overlock edge on that 2 bits of the panel, and then sewed up the rest of the princess seam, the other princess seam, both side seams, sewed all them together, and then attached it to the bodice shell, attached the skirt lining to the bodice lining, and then added in the zip, and then closed up the rest of the centre back seams. So it is a completed dress now. The only thing I haven't done is put in a button and buttonhole, because we don't need to do that right now for the mock-up. We'll just do that when we do the real dress. But yeah, it's looking good. If she's happy to be on camera, I'll maybe get her to try it on camera, and then we can see how it looks. Yeah, I think it looks really nice. I love it. Yeah. Yeah.
Angie came round last night and you would have seen the clip of her trying it on. So we absolutely love it. It fits her perfect. We're really happy with everything now. So we are ready to just make it for real. So exciting. So I have my big roll of fabric. So I'm just going to roll out 4 meters of this, get it washed and hung up to dry, and then in the next couple of days hopefully get the final dress made. So that's 1 meter. Meters, 3 and 4. Then I'm just gonna start there. So let's get this in the wash, then we can get it dried, ironed, and ready to go. So yeah, I off camera put it all together, finished the final dress because I was running out of time. I wanted to have this done in August and it's now the 1st of September, so I was really kind of rushing to be also filming along. And I thought I covered quite well the actual sewing process of the last mock-up. So I thought it was just kind of repeating myself to do the same with this. So I just finished it off camera, got it all done. Angie tried it on and we absolutely love it. So yeah, she is finished. Everything sits beautifully and yeah, we're really happy with it. And then the back, again, it's beautiful. We love how all of this is sitting on her back. The sleeves are just how we want them. I did do the button loop and the self-covered button up here. And yeah, it's all finished. That is it for this video then. That is this dress now finished. All it needs is hemmed and kind of just the minor finishing details done at the start next year once I have all the other girls ready as well. And yeah, she's beautiful, we love her, and she fits perfect. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next one.